Welcome to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. Today, I am interviewing Lourie, and we're going to talk about depression and how it's interrelated with cancer. There are many ways to look at breast cancer, specifically the metabolic way, taking into consideration the pathways that promote cancer, the environmental way, how increased exposure to toxins is becoming a greater influence, the emotional way, how trauma, either recent or many years prior, contributes. But simply put, a cancer diagnosis is a very loud message that there is loss of harmony, usually in more than one area of a woman's life. So the task at hand becomes how to restore harmony physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And Lourie is a naturopath, acupuncturist, homeopath, and holistic breath health expert with more than 35 years of experience understanding complex chronic disease. She believes healing is always possible, and her mission is to empower women with the tools needed to deeply recover their health and restore their life. Welcome, Lourie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, this has been a topic that I have been wanting to discuss for quite some time. Every so often, I do have patients that are found that they have a cancer diagnosis, and it can be extremely overwhelming. And obviously, there is the conventional standard way of approaching things, and that is not to be diminished. This is not about either or. It's both. I think it's really important to pursue and look at the benefits and risks and pursue the conventional route, but in hand also, do alternative things to improve your response to whatever standard cancer therapies that are offered depending on the diagnosis.
Absolutely. And I like to use the word complementary because they do really work hand in hand. They support each other. And when you're working with a practitioner that is science-based, many of the oncologists say, I don't want you on any supplements at all during chemo. And actually, there are supplements that you can take which will augment, and which means improve, the outcome of chemotherapy. There are integrative approaches that you can take to reduce the side effects during treatment of chemo and radiation. And it is possible to get through chemotherapy in a way that is positive for your health, even though it is a very arduous medical treatment.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to understand that it is complementary. Absolutely. So, how did you even get into this field? You have multiple hats, and I'm sure that everybody has a story. I was curious if you could just briefly explain. Oh, and by the way, I want to just let everybody know that if you enjoy this episode, please click the like button and subscribe. So go ahead.
Well, I went to the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, many, many years ago. And how I got there is I was living in a community in New York City in the 70s, and my roommate had cancer. And I went with her to Memorial Sloan Kettering when the doctor said to her, you've gotten a ton of radiation. There's nothing more we can do for you. Bye. And she was in her 20s, and she looked at me and she said, not happening. I'm not dying now. And she found a integrative chiropractor who did detoxifying diets using iridology. Now, this was in 1976. Wow. And you have to understand that in 1976, the word detox was not the household word that it is now. And he used iridology. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the map. The eye is mapped and into different sections. And if there's a little black spot in a certain section, it's an indication that you have toxins build up. So he began to work with her and everybody in this community, and she began to spit up stuff that had these black specks in it. And she took it to a lab, and the lab said, well, this is a side effect of the chemotherapy. It's coming out of your lungs. So I ended up working for this doctor, and there was this huge pile of material there, and I was going through it, and there was the catalog to the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And I had thinking I was going to go to medical school, but when I found that, I realized this was my calling. Because when I first started working for him, I was very naive as to the power and beauty of natural medicine. For example, a young girl came in and she had very bad skin. And I'm in my mind thinking, why is she here? You have bad skin, you take antibiotics. And she, now I would never do that, but this was a long time ago. And a month later, she came in, her skin was much better. She had lost weight. And then I began to really pay attention to the people who were coming to see him. People who had been either harmed by the treatment of the medical profession, or the medical profession had basically said, we can't do anything for you. And everybody was getting better.
Right.
So that was really the shift of what is going on here with natural medicine? And that's why I attended the National College of Naturopathic Medicine instead of going to regular medical school.
Right.
And so when I graduated, I moved to California and I got my acupuncture license, and I had a practice basically focused on women and complex diseases. And then my dear friend developed breast cancer. So I upped my level of education immediately. And I said to her when she called me hysterically crying, saying the 4 words no woman wants to hear, they found a lump. I said to her, you know what, you're not going to go alone. I'm going to go to absolutely every treatment with you, which is actually what happened over a period of 18 months. So she was being treated at UCSF with one of the main oncologists. And one day the doctor looked up at the blood work and looked up at us and said, so what are you doing? And I thought there was a problem. And I told her, and she said, well, your blood work is not the blood work of somebody who's in the middle of chemotherapy. And I want all of my patients to be doing that too. So that was the beginning of my practice, focusing pretty much solely on women with breast cancer. And it's such a prevalent disease and diagnosis in the Bay Area, but it's also very extensive throughout the US and Canada. And then I developed an online program to bring this integrative knowledge to women throughout the world.
That is awesome, because it's so necessary. I can't tell you how many people are always looking for information like that, especially right at the tip of their fingers. All they have to do is just log on, right?
Yes, it's right there 24/7, and it's there to support women no matter where they are, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and we'll have all of that in the show notes. So if anybody ever needs that information, they can go right to those notes on this podcast. So, let's just start from the top. Someone gets a diagnosis of cancer and obviously very overwhelmed, and and it can be extremely anxiety provoking. It can cause a sense of hopelessness and depression. What do you think is the next step that someone needs to take? And I know you use the words most overlooked steps. So if you can include that into what would you say should be the next steps besides going to your program, but
That's okay.
giving them a preview.
I think that it's first of all, initially the diagnosis, there's a lot of anxiety and overwhelm because your life as you knew it is radically changed in a very short period of time. And you're rushed through the biopsy and the appointments, and they want you to start chemotherapy immediately or radiation. And the message is, this is not a medical emergency. Breast cancer doesn't develop in a week or a month. It's a slow growing miscommunication between your body and certain cells. So you do not need to be rushed. Like if you find out there's an abnormal lump, you do not have to have a biopsy tomorrow. It's not a medical emergency. You can develop your support team, which is very important because you're not aware at the time of diagnosis how disrupted your life is going to be while you're in treatment. If you have children at home, you need to get the village to arrange for their driving to activity 1 and 2 and meals and organization, because there are going to be times during your treatment where you are not functional. And that is a reality. So I think initially in the first stages of breast cancer, there's a lot of anxiety because it's unknown. And then as treatment is winding down and you're worn down by the length of treatment. So there needs to be nurturance in, during, and after treatment. And that can be in the form of many cancer centers offer Reiki, they offer massage, they offer acupuncture. I'm an acupuncturist. I think acupuncture should be done as often as possible because there is physiological benefit, and there's been research about how it reduces chemotherapy-induced nausea. It can reduce neuropathy. It can lift your spirits and your mind, reduce depression. Acupuncture is a wonderful modality, and it does not interfere with your medical treatments. So we have this thing in our society that if women do self-care, the message is you're spoiling yourself or you're overreacting. And if you build self-care into your treatment right away, there is going to be less anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. So I think that depression comes in as women get worn down.
Mm.
And depression for me as an integrative practitioner, as I'm sure it is for you, it's like a chapter heading because everyone's experience is very different.
Right.
Depression and hopelessness seem to go together. And there are a lot of emotions that get put in the back burner that then come rushing forward when you're done active treatment. And that can lead to depression and hopelessness. So a lot of women have this attitude, well, I'm just going to get through treatment and then I'll deal with everything later. And there is no one way to do that. But my experience has been when you do that, and it's often unconscious, it's not like you say it out loud, those emotions are going to come rushing forward when you're done active treatment. And you can feel like you're having a quote unquote nervous breakdown with a lot of depression and hopelessness. So the more you can, during the time, get the support that you need, the less of the depression and hopelessness there can be when you're done active treatment. Because the other side of active treatment is for women who have hormonally positive breast cancer, they are put on these hormone blocking medications. And they have their own level of difficulty, which no matter how much you're told, when you start feeling these side effects, the reality leads to a lot of depression and hopelessness. And I have a phrase about tamoxifen and aromatase inhibitor, which is can't live on them, and you're afraid you won't live without them. That's a very intense experience. And I have groups with thousands of women in it, and my Instagram page, thousands of people. Everyone suffers on these medications.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And it's not just tamoxifen. There's other medications as well, I'm sure, that can cause depression and anxiety and all sorts of cognitive issues.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so it is a matter. I think it's important to find a naturopath or functional medicine provider to help you, navigate through these things, especially if they have some kind of background in cancer, chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery, or some connection of sorts. So how would you prepare your body? And if you can give us some
Sure.
clues about how would you prepare your body, your mind for chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, other than what you just mentioned?
Great. I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. First of all, I love integrative practitioners and functional medicine and naturopathic doctors, but the level of knowledge and studying that I have done specifically in the world of oncology is another step. So if you want to find somebody to work with, I think it's really important that you find somebody that specializes in oncology, because it's very different than generalized functional or naturopathic medicine. There's a lot of research about intermittent fasting and reducing side effects of chemotherapy. So everything that I have in my program and that I use in my online community and my practice is referenced and researched. It's not like, oh, I think I'll do this. So there's Walter Longo has written books about this, but intermittent fasting, what happens is cancer cells crave glucose or sugar. And in 1918, there was this German scientist by the name of Otto Warburg who discovered the Warburg effect, and he won the Nobel Medicine Peace Prize for that in 1924. Basically, what he discovered is that cancer cells, given a choice between oxygen for their gas tank and glucose, will always choose glucose or sugar, even though they have to work twice as hard and they get much less ATP or energy. So when you're going for chemotherapy, if you intermittent fast, and the physiological effect of that takes place at around hour 14, then you go into chemotherapy and you're not eating. And what happens? The cancer cells go, oh my goodness, here's chemotherapy. I'm going to take that up. But your healthy cells, when they're hungry, they shut down and they go into protective mode. So the cancer cells take more of the chemo, and the healthy cells are protected. This has been proven with lots of research. That's one of the things. The caveat about intermittent fasting is if you are developing something called cancer-related cachexia, or CRC, or you're losing too much weight, you do not intermittent fast. And if you are going to intermittent fast, I encourage everyone to speak to their oncologist about it before they do any of this, okay? The second impact suggestion that I have is when I accompanied my friend to UCSF Chemotherapy Infusion Center, the minute she walked in, they said to her, oh, you look a little thin. Would you like some Ensure?
I was going to ask you about that. I
Yeah,
cannot
here we
tell
go.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like what's the number one ingredient of Ensure? Glucose.
Exactly.
You do not want to drink Ensure, ladies or gentlemen, if you have cancer treatment.
Not
It's
glucose,
not.
high fructose corn syrup.
Yes, exactly. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yes,
The worst.
yeah.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
That's
same
like,
thing, but it's a toxic form of the same thing.
it is, you're right. It's even worse because it's toxic. So, and your cancer cells are going, oh, thank you so much. I'm getting chemotherapy, but I have a lot of energy now because you put gas in my gas tank. So do not drink Ensure. And then like she's getting the infusion. Oh, here's a hard candy. Here's a popsicle. Here's some Gatorade. And when she's finished, would you like a cupcake? 5 times during a 4-hour infusion was she offered sugar. So how do you show up for chemotherapy? If you've been given the okay by your oncologist, you intermittent fast. Number 2, you bring a tea, which I'm going to tell you, it's super easy to make. 2 mint tea bags. Make sure these are organic mint tea bags. You want to get a knob of fresh ginger. Ginger is an herb that's been around for thousands of years. It's the #1 stomachic in the world. What does that mean? It supports your digestion. Take off the skin, you chop it up, you put it on top of the stove with about 2 cups of water, and you simmer it for 15 minutes. Turn off the heat, put in the 2 tea bags, and let that steep. And then you put that in a thermos and you bring that to chemotherapy with you. And you eat that, drink that while you're in the middle of chemo.
What does that do?
Well, first of all, it reduces nausea. Ginger and mint will reduce nausea. I know you've also been given anti-nausea medication, which is important. It will help flush your system and keep you hydrated. You need to be very hydrated when you're getting chemo. You want to flush it out. And if you're hydrated enough, you should have to pee every 15 to 20 minutes. And you may be thinking, oh, that's a lot. That's how much you want to hydrate. Okay.
Absolutely. So before you go on, what is it that they should replace the Ensure with?
Well, that's a whole conversation. That's my proprietary healing smoothie. And it has a very specific type of whey powder or pea-isolated protein powder. And there's quercetin in it, and D-ribose, and chia and flax seeds, and liquid, and maybe a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of blueberries or blackberries. But there is a very specific, we don't just want to go to Costco and buy a protein powder, because I've had people come in with protein powder that have chocolate, sugar, and bananas in it. Want to get a very specific type of either whey powder or pea-isolate protein powder.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Because what do they say if they're offered all of these things? But no, I've got my drink, and they already have their recipe. And I think you included in the show notes a recipe for that smoothie.
Wonderful. And if I didn't, I'm going to provide it for you afterwards. Yes.
Yeah, because I saw that as part of the healing smoothie opt-in, correct?
Great. Wonderful. Perfect.
Yeah. So that would be awesome. Yeah. It's always good to know what to do instead, instead of what also, I mean, you want to know what not to do, but also what can you do instead when people offer Ensure. My father-in-law died of biliary duct cancer. And towards the end, even though he wasn't cachexic, he was nauseous, and that's all he had was Ensure. and
Oh,
all sorts of
sorry.
sweet things like that. I know, it's just like it's just terrible. I wish I could take that drink off the market completely, because there's so many
Yeah,
healthier options than Ensure. Yeah.
absolutely.
So, so I know we talked a little bit about how integrative care can benefit women going through breast cancer, just to what you've already told us. But does mindset play a part in the success,
100%.
even? Yeah.
I think mindset is the foundation of everything. And I think it's very difficult to keep that positive, I can do this mindset approach by yourself. So you need to work with people who really get what you're going through. Breast cancer is a diagnosis that no one volunteers for. It gets plopped in your life. We
Mm-hmm.
all have experiences like that. We can't, as we get older, we can't not, right?
Mm-hmm.
The attitude is, are you going to, how do you adjust? And from where I sit, there is this masculine approach towards cancer, which is we're at war, we're going to attack it, it's something to defeat or conquer. And I think breast cancer is a disease of the feminine. It's a disease that women get. Yes, men also get it, but that's not my area. There are men who get breast cancer, and that's a whole nother conversation. But it's not something we want to attack or conquer or eradicate or cut off or out necessarily, because we are doing that to ourselves. We are attacking ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to find a more feminine approach towards looking at this diagnosis or disease. In one of the exercises I do with the women I work with is, let's begin to have a conversation about that little lump in your breast.
Mm.
And women looked at me and go, what are you talking about? And the doctor doesn't do that with me. And I go, well, that's great. The doctor does what they do. And this is what I do. Let's hear what this little lump in your breast has to say. And they are amazed at what comes up.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
the more we deal with that unconscious or hidden or not aware stuff, the healthier we become. And
Absolutely.
that's really what's important.
Well, the body keeps the score, right? And many
Yes.
times we have symptoms that are symbolic, on some level, subconsciously or unconsciously, of what we need to resolve emotionally or spiritually, and not just physically. And I think
Mm-hmm.
people definitely improve in their health all around when they address things in that way. And, it might sound a little woo-woo, but there's lots of research about the biology of trauma, tons of research. So, and I think it's, if it's not going to hurt you to do these things, to really look on a deeper level about what's going on energetically,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it is something that is taking up space. It represents some bigger problem or conflict or something you need to resolve on some level, and that is part of the journey.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So one thing that I find, I obviously, my niche is depression, anxiety, and other psychiatric issues. And being a functional medicine doctor, we end up treating everything because we look at the whole body.
Right.
You have patients that are, quote unquote, doing all the right things, and then they're shocked that they have a cancer diagnosis, and very, very angry. Like, I eat right, and I exercise, and I'm sleeping well, and I'm meditating, and I'm breathing, like I'm doing all the right things. Why did this happen to me? What would be your answer to that? I know it's a big
No, that was my friend.
yes.
What the heck is going on here? And almost verbatim of what you just said. Um,
And it's what they don't have control over. I mean, it's the
she's an
environment.
Ashkenazi Jew. It just, she was Ashkenazi, she is Ashkenazi Jewish, and that increases your chances. Sometimes people have absolutely no history of cancer in their family at all. But most people don't exercise and eat properly and have toxin-free home. I mean, it's not, most people slip in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes, if you do a full, really in-depth genetic panel, you find some little really weird snip, and there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's epigenetics and there's genetics. You can't control what you're given. You can control to a certain extent whether that gene gets turned on or not. A lot of people have stress, horrible stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that stress, they get a diagnosis of some serious illness. There is always some little thing that is contributing to that when it pops up. And nobody has a perfect life. It's very hard to get all these little dots in a row. And we do the best we can. And sometimes, even with that, you get a diagnosis. And to those people, I say, well, it could be a lot worse than it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because you were doing everything, quote unquote, right. You got a smaller tumor and it was less aggressive and it was discovered earlier. And that gives you a better chance of recovering from this fully. So having this great healthy life is never wasted, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great answer. And so just for those people who are new to functional medicine, I think it's important for them to know statistically how food is part of the program, changing your diet. I think you told me statistically that the standard American diet is 4 times increase. Why don't you say what that was? Yeah.
The standard American diet quadruples the cancer rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share the reference for that with you and your community. Quadruples.
Right.
4 times. That's big.
Mm-hmm. That is big. Yes. And, as people are, as we go on, with time, we're finding that younger and younger people are having cancer. That's partly related to, our parents having poor diets and being born to those parents. But then the genes, what you were talking about earlier, is you have a genetic makeup, but it is the epigenetics and that really make the difference. And it is food, healthy choices in food that turn off the bad genes and turn on the good genes and reduce your risk of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important for people to understand that, but it's not the only piece. We talked a little bit about the environment and how that all of the things that are in our environment that can cause cancer or increase our risk of cancer. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll tell a story. I had a 35-year-old woman coming to see me with unexplained infertility. And I do fertility work in addition to breast cancer. And I love that diagnosis, unexplained infertility, because for me, it means they didn't do the right tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, she had a full functional, full fertility workup and everything was, quote, normal, but she still couldn't get pregnant. She was looking at $40,000 IVF experience. And she came in and she had on enough perfume, and I had a scent-free office, that I felt like I was on the ground floor of Macy's. And for those of you who don't know what that reference is, the ground floor of Macy's is the perfume floor. And you walk in and like you're assaulted. So I said to her, tell me about scents. And she said, oh, I love scent. I have the plugins, and already the hair is standing up on the back of my head. The plugins in the wall. I have that stuff, the sticks in the oil. I have here was the killer, literally.
Mm-hmm.
I spray my sofa with Febreze.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Febreze is just basically putting toxic chemicals on the furniture, and then you sit on it, and then your skin touches it, and it's absorbed into your skin. Her dog got on it and she pets the dog. Anyway, it was toxic overload mess. And she was putting dryer sheets in her dryer. So I said to her, so do me a favor when you go home, put every single thing that you use in your household on the counter and send me a photo. 29 items.
Wow. Wow.
So I said to her, you don't have unexplained infertility. This is the answer to why you can't get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So she took a week off from work. She threw everything out that was like that. She bought eco laundry detergent, washed everything that could be washed, threw out what couldn't be washed, and she had to throw out her sofa because we couldn't detoxify it from Febreze. No more plugins, none of that. And that stuff was costing her hundreds of dollars a month. I mean, it is toxic and it's expensive.
Right.
So healing smoothie and some supplements and detox protocol, 3 months later, naturally pregnant, no $45,000 IVF. She has 3 children. So
wow,
this is not cancer, but this is an example of what you don't know is really impacting your health. And the advertising and the messages that we get on television are not our friend.
Mm-hmm.
They don't support health. They support the big companies that manufacture these estrogen disrupting products.
Right. I was just going to say, I think it's important to explain why. And the why is that these chemicals in these products are estrogen disruptors or endocrine disruptors, including estrogen, all of the endocrine disruptors. So all your hormones are signaling inappropriately or incorrectly. And that's why that person was unable to get pregnant.
Right. And I like to explain it that the estrogen needs to be detoxified before it can be excreted. And what happens is these chemicals, the phrase estrogen disruptors, they get into the parking lot where the estrogen would normally go to be bound to be excreted. And when it shows up to look for its parking spot, the spot is taken by these chemicals. And so the estrogen then develops into an unhealthy form of itself.
Right. Absolutely. And that leads to other problems,
Yes,
like
that's
PMS,
PCOS, infertility,
right?
breast cancer, and endocrine.
Endometriosis,
Right.
fibroid tumors, all sorts of issues. Yeah. So
migraine headaches.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's all connected.
It is all connected. So we have to detoxify the home. We have to open up the pathways in your body, support the health of your gut. As Dr. Stein knows, I mean, it's not just take a pill. We have to go through a protocol, and we need to begin by overcoming the messaging that we get from American advertising. Oh, you have a gut problem, take a Tums. Oh, you're depressed, take a pill. I mean, there is a process that we go through to recover our health.
Right, right. And, there is also, even though this is not specifically about men, but it explains why there are many men, especially really young men, who have low testosterone for the same reason.
Yeah.
Hormone signaling caused by these estrogen disruptors or endocrine disruptors. So it's an accumulation of chemicals that are not being excreted, and it's overload on the body.
Right. They're eating the standard American diet. They're putting all this gunk on their hair and over-the-counter face cream and body lotions and toxic deodorant, and their body cannot process it. So they get low testosterone, or they develop breast cancer. There is a increased rise now in breast cancer for men.
Yes. Awesome. That was an excellent explanation. I really love that. I think we hit all of the nails on the head. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that we have missed. So I'm wondering, what is it that people can do? Let's say they don't have any history, or let's say they have no history of themselves having cancer, but they have a family history. What are some things that people can do other than what we already mentioned to prevent or reduce their risk of cancer? Is there anything that we had missed? And any tests that we can do?
Any tests? Well, let's just start out before we go into tests. Let's say that you want to be like this young woman I worked with and detoxify your home. All of that chemical stuff you want to take out. Divorcing yourself from the standard American diet as much as you can is the second item. Incorporating exercise is the third item. There is an enormous amount of research about the benefits of exercise for reducing depression, reducing cardiovascular risk, all of that. It's really important. Now, as far as testing is concerned, unfortunately, in the world of medicine, any advanced functional medicine testing will not be covered by your insurance for most part. If you have a very strong family history of cancer, you can go to the cancer center and maybe get some genetic counseling, which I would recommend, and see if you can get some of the advanced functional medicine testing for cancer. For example, copper really is a big driver of angiogenesis or cancer cell formation. So you can look at what is your copper level, what is your zinc level, what is your ceruloplasmin level. I don't know if it's going to be covered by your insurance. There's something called the Galleria test, which we were talking about, which tells you if you have genetic SNPs that might be contributing towards cancer development. Notice the phrase might mean you're going to, right? Some women who have very strong familial histories, I keep wanting to say herstories, of their mother, their maternal aunt, their maternal cousins, their sister developing breast cancer, they get a higher level of screening, even starting in their late 30s. I have women, unfortunately, the age of 32 have developed breast cancer. So then we have fertility concerns with that. So there's not just the oncologist, there's the infertility reproductive endocrinologist expert, and there's me that make up the team. You need the whole team approach to decide how you're going to proceed, because the fertility drugs then have a lot of hormones in it, and that can really push your cancer forward. So
okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd say to find a functional medicine doctor who really is expert in this and can really help guide you as to how do you need to test in certain ways biannually, and how do you need to clean up your life as much as possible. But as you just said, sometimes people do everything and then they end up. And, my response is, well, you did everything and we caught it early, and it wasn't as large as it could have been, and it wasn't as aggressive as it could have been. And in some ways that's a success.
Right. And one thing that I find is when people do functional medicine and they get on that journey, they're a lot more aware of their body and how the environment interacts, how you interact with the environment, how you interact with other people, how you interact with yourself. And, you're right that you probably picked it up earlier if you do find that you have a cancer diagnosis. So, and it could have been worse, probably. Yeah. And if you do go through the journey of treatment, you're certainly going to get through that journey much better.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. So why don't you tell everyone where you're located? And I would also, and how people can reach you, but I would also ask if you could, if there was a way to locate specific functional medicine doctors that specialize in integrative cancer treatment.
There is no one reference or resource for that. So unfortunately. So what I would say, if somebody, I do coaching all over the US and the world. If you want to find somebody locally, you can reach out to me and I will do my best to find someone. I can't guarantee that I'm going to, but I know a lot of people throughout the US. Because when you go to IFM.org and do practitioner lookup, you can put in your zip code, but that doesn't specifically say if those physicians are oncology experts. There is the Society for Integrative Oncology website. That's societyforintegrativeoncology.org. And they have a practitioner's website in their website, and it is by state. So that is one thing that I can say to you. A lot of integrative oncology is not going to be covered by your insurance. So people see their regular medical oncologist, and then they are consulting with an integrative doctor or someone such as myself to make sure that they're getting the right tests and they're getting the treatment that they need, and then reducing the symptoms and the side effects of the treatment during and after. I find that depression and hopelessness comes up a lot after. Anxiety is usually during, and then we hit the depression and hopelessness button.
Right.
And
Right.
the more work and support you do during and the self-care you get during, the less the volume of the depression and hopelessness is after active treatment is over.
Right.
It's right. It's
Yes.
time and money well spent to do self-care during as much as possible.
And asking for help. Sometimes it's really hard for people to ask for help, but creating that village. I'm so glad you said that in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm,
Really important to create that support system and ask
mm-hmm.
for help. And friends, family, church, temple, whatever organization
Yeah.
you're part of, just say, hey, this is what's going on with me. I could really use your support. I'm trying to put a team together, and just see what comes up from that.
A lot of the cancer centers have social workers and support there. So I would encourage everyone to start there and don't hesitate to ask a lot and often.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much. This was awesome. I
Thank
feel like
you.
we covered the entire gamut. I'm sure there's always going to be more questions, but maybe we'll leave that to next time. I
Sure.
really appreciate your time. And I'm sure people are going to really enjoy this episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.
Yes. Oh, before we end, just tell me what's the best website to contact you, best way to contact you. It'll all be in the show notes too, but I'd like to have it stated verbally as well.
Sure. My practice website is my name, Carol Lourie, and that's LOURIE.com. And on the top, there's a contact me page. Just click the button, give me a little bit of information. I respond to every contact me form I get individually.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're located in the Bay Area.
I'm in California,
right?
the Bay
Yep.
Area of California.
That's right. Okay. That's great to know. Awesome. So thank you again, and have a great weekend.